Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to our latest webcast that we're bringing you from Travel Weekly as part of our Roadmap to Recovery series. And I'm joined today by Alistair Rowland, who is the Chief Executive of Bluebay Travel and also the Chairman of ABTA. I've got Gemma Antrobus, who is Managing Director of Haslemere Travel, and John Bevan, who is the CEO of dnata in the UK and Europe. So, hello, everyone. I've brought you all together because we've obviously just heard, or earlier today, we had a few hours to digest it, I guess, but the framework that's been released from the Global Travel Task Force. I'm sure you've all got views. I've seen a lot of you on social media. Some of you have put out statements already. I'll start with you, John. Your statement said you welcomed it after we've been waiting for it for a while, and the intention, I guess, to get things moving on May the 17th, but you also expressed frustration. And you did say that you thought that the prospect of enjoying some summer sun remains some way off. So how are you feeling?
Yeah, well, as you say, we are a little frustrated. You know, it's good that there is a framework, and with the traffic lights, obviously it will be even better once we know who's in which category or which destination in which traffic light. But you know, that it doesn't feel it's going to be wildly different to last summer at the moment, because you know, how quickly will they change those destinations? How reassured will customers be? And then the introduction of all the testing. Now, I heard Grant Shapps on television this morning say that you could actually take your lateral flow test with you for the pre-departure one. I'm assuming that they'll stick to that, because that's good. You can take those with you free of charge. But you'll need a PCR test. And you kind of, well, my initial thought was, well, if I'm fully vaccinated and I'm coming back from a green destination and my lateral flow test is negative, why do I now need to go and do a PCR test? Why is the lateral flow test not reliable? Is my vaccination not reliable? So will that have an effect on the take up on the vaccine program? Because why bother? You know, if a lot of people are doing, you know, really pushing for it because they want to go traveling, I'm guessing, right? And the cost, you know, at the moment, as they pointed out, and how he rightly pointed out himself, is he understands that the costs in Europe are like half of what you can get it for here. So for a family of four, you know, going on a family holiday, they could end up spending hundreds of pounds just to get home.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, so that bit's frustrating. I think there's other ways of presenting it. And of course, we've got to be safe. We don't want to bring back variants. But I would have thought the lateral flow test, you know, if it's positive, then yes, you have to go and get a PCR test or do something like that. Okay. And you are relying on people being honest, but you know, you could get your lateral flow test done anyhow. While you're out there, anyone could take it, couldn't they? So yeah, so it's a bit disappointing, and I am worried that we'll be in this kind of U-turn scenario again through the summer. So we need more details, really.
All right, well, let's come on as well to how it, you know, you're saying it could have been presented differently and what we think could happen. But let's just get the reaction of the other two. I mean, Gemma, I was following you, a few tweets initially this morning, and you were talking about goalposts being moved again. But you also did say there was some good news in that Grant Shapps did say he's now not going to be advising not to book a holiday. And you seemed pleased about that. I know that's something you've communicated to your clients as well. So what was your initial view, and how are you feeling?
My initial view was that, you know, it's great that we've had it a couple of days in advance, wonderful. But there were so many holes in it that we really need to be able to start looking at how we plan forward. And yet we've been told by Grant Shapps that we still have 2 to 3 more weeks with no dates, just 2 to 3 more weeks before we get any kind of indication about these green list countries. Now, I appreciate it's all based on science, and what they might produce now wouldn't necessarily be relevant for May, but we had no firm indication that there would be a green list that would be possible for travel on the 17th of May. And really just, there was nothing in it sort of other than, you know, cruise is going to be considered in the same way as, you know, air travel, which is fantastic, and that domestic cruise could possibly start from the 17th of May. There wasn't anything else really in it that we didn't already know. The traffic light system is practically the same as last year. In fact, it's worse, because the traffic light system from last year, if it was a green country, you didn't need a PCR test. So I'm a little bit fed up with being grateful for information that's not particularly helpful in terms of us all getting going again. And the fact that we still continue to be in the dark about how to run our businesses profitably again, yet there's no mention of sector specific support. It just baffles me, and it baffles me, and it always will do, is why we get such little consideration in terms of the fact that these goalposts have been moved. 12th of April is what we were told, and we just haven't had that information.
Yeah, well, both of you have said, you can't quite understand this new testing. You're saying it's actually adding another layer in that we didn't have last year. Alistair, do you feel the same? I mean, I saw John Holland-Kay on television this morning, the chief executive of Heathrow, saying he thought this extra PCR test from a green country, when you'd already done a lateral flow that was negative, was overkill. Do you share that view?
Yeah, I think, it's definitely a disappointing Friday after a disappointing Monday.
Yes.
Slightly ahead of schedule, and then Prime Minister didn't really say anything material. So that was disappointing. In everybody's returns that I read towards the Global Travel Task Force, nobody was talking about PCR testing in green countries. And to John's point, if you've been vaccinated and you've done your lateral flow and you're in a green country, no variants of concern, it's completely overkill and unaffordable as well. And I think, as Gemma said, there's so many holes in this framework, and if we're not careful, we will be in a worse position for last summer for a number of reasons, not least, green, amber, red is okay, but green, amber, red, and then a watch list the same.
Yes.
That makes it even more complex, and with no clarity on does watch list give 2 weeks or 4 weeks, all really complex. And you can see Steve Heapy's view this morning that he's got his time to set up and start, and he's not prepared to do that. So it does mean that where travel was getting slightly excited about having some form of travel mid-May, it's looking like there'll be very little in terms of any form of travel until mid-June.
Yeah, okay. Let's just pick up on that green watch list, John. Because some might say, well, that's good, isn't it? Because they're going to give us more warning and we won't have this 48-hour mad dash to the border trying to get home. And I think that's what they're trying to avoid. But Alistair's suggesting, we still don't have detail on that and how much time will be given. And, if you're running a tour operation, it must be very hard.
Yeah, and I think, I don't understand. We've been in this situation now for a year, and the testing in most countries has improved over the last 12 months. And therefore, the data must be quite solid now. And, I know that they keep saying that obviously with COVID, things change quite quickly. And we're always a bit behind the curve, right? 2 weeks down. You should be able to put all that into data analytics and be able to sort of trend that and be able to give us and consumers a much more forward view. So if you did have a watch list, they should be able to give us weeks worth of warning.
Notice.
They should be able to see a trend, map it back, go, with everything that's going on, they should be able to see who's going to start peaking and therefore give people plenty of warning to not book, or if they've just booked, then change it. Or if they're about to leave, know that they'll probably still get back in time, or make arrangements. But the way it's looking, it feels to me it's still going to be pretty short notice. So yes, there'll be a watch list, and you won't know which way it's going to go.
Mm.
And they've given no indication of. They should be at this time able to tell us, well, you'll get 2 weeks notice of any change between categories, and then we could probably work to that. But all the way through this, we've never had enough warning to work. And I don't think the government's ever really understood the work involved for our teams to make the changes. Especially when you've got travel agents who've made bookings for their clients, they come on to us, the client wants to make a change. You've got a whole chain of events of people that you have to coordinate, and then suppliers that you've got to get in line to make all those changes. It's a big process.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've really taken that consideration. And when they were doing those quick turns, So yes, they're probably going to go from 4 hours, you know, with my pessimism as it is at the moment. I'm thinking, well, if they could do 4 hours for Dubai, maybe they're going to give us a week. That's not enough.
Yeah.
So we just need more warning. I don't think they've got an excuse. There's more than enough data out there to be able to model this super well. And I'm surprised they can't tell us already or give us an indication. And I can see it from my numbers. The consumers are obviously baffled because there's been no uptick today. Well, normally,
really?
when end of February, when they gave us that kind of more positive news with the roadmap, there was, you know, there's some people came out with rather creative numbers,
yes.
but there was an uptick, quite a considerable one. But at the moment, nothing's moving. So
nothing. So this was the big date we were waiting for, and the release of this report. And you hoped, I guess, the whole industry was hoping it would have an impact on, you know,
nothing.
Bookings, and you've not seen a thing.
Either that, or they haven't been watching TV.
Well, I think most people have. Well, I think we've made enough noise about it. Gemma, a couple of questions for you then. Just picking up on John's point, what have your customers? What's their initial reaction been? And this thing on the watch list then. I mean, for you as a travel agent, how hard is that to sort of manage? You know, how are your customers? Would they be confident with this extra watch list to book, or is it just not workable for you?
I think we're going to have to watch and wait and see who is on it and what those parameters are. You know, looking back to last summer, it was the hardest thing to work with in terms of the what would go on and would not go on. And you'd be, you know, happily in bliss making bookings for 2 or 3 weeks later, thinking finally we can make some money. And then as a flick of a switch, they would be put on a, you know, a red list or whatever, taken off the list last year. And I think it's all about this timing. And, you know, I'd like to think we get more than a week, but I'm not that hopeful for it. A week is more helpful than
48 hours.
Absolutely.
Yes.
In terms of what our clients are saying, I haven't had any clients ring today and ask to move anything or do anything. I think they're just as confused as we are. I have communicated to them in as manageable format as possible.
I thought it was very good. I'm on your mailing list. I don't
great.
know. I thought it was very good. She sent a Q&A out to her whole client list to try and sort of, you know,
break it down,
force through this, but which I thought was very good actually. So I hope it does have an effect.
I hope so. I hope if anything, it just doesn't cause people to panic, because all it really says is, you know, we're still in pause, aren't we? We're still in pause. We don't know anything more. There's no reason to cancel anything more because we don't know what can happen and what can't happen.
Yeah.
But also what I hope it does is makes people realise that there is, you know, hope coming, and it's not too far away, and we will update, you know, clients when we get to that point. But I had a new inquiry this morning for a summer holiday for a family to Europe. So not everybody feels the same way. Some people are more bullish about, you know, travel, and they're less destination specific, granted. They're more about where can I go? The question is, where can I go? I want to go away for the first 2 weeks in August. I want to take my family. We've got X amount of money to spend. Where can I go?
That's so hard for you, because
it's really hard.
How can you advise confidently?
You know, as we're doing at the moment, it's, you know, multi-destination, providing probably more quotes than we would normally do, but for multiple destinations, similar types of holidays, and, you know, talking clients through the process that we're in at the moment. So, you know, deposit payments, we'll keep you posted. We won't take any balances till we know exactly what's happening. Obviously, we're there to handhold you through the whole process. Once the PCR situation evolves and we know more about testing centres. Last year we did the same. We provided clients with a list of local and national, because we obviously have clients spread across the country, of places they could ring easily and get a test. Obviously it's down to them to do so, but just anything we can do to help that process along the way. So no, thankfully, no cancellations or moving.
No mass cancellations, but still hard. And of course, you know, Steve Heapy this morning was suggesting it will probably be the business routes, you know, the Heathrow, Singapore. He's not confident they're going to put sort of run-of-the-mill standard, you know, holiday destinations on that list for, you know, well, early enough, which is why he's pushed his program back. Alistair, what's been the response from your customers? Anything?
I think since the kind of slight uptick on the 22nd of February statement, it has been flat, no doubt, and bookings generally, and certainly in the long haul space, have been October onwards So I think consumers generally booking really considered trips are taking a very, very cautious approach. If I look at, I don't know, last week, 85% of the business was for October onwards, and that just shows that, you know, people just don't really have faith in the in the short term. And I think, you know, for agents and operators, it's incredibly difficult, because if the flying schedules do go, anybody putting together an atoll file with the responsibilities that come with that are going to be, you know, just because something's on the watch list, it won't mean that the flying changes. And whilst there's discussion about, you know, the CAA having new rights over airlines, it's unlikely to crystallise, you know, very quickly. So I think agents and operators are in for a tough summer trying to manage the clients who will want to move bookings on a file that remains live with a flight that remains live. But in general,
that's a really good point, actually, Alistair. So yes, if it was green, you know, it was going to go. But if it goes into amber, perhaps some tour operators would have then felt they should give a refund because they can't. You know, at what point, you know, what happens on the watch list? Would you, you know, I mean, John, as a tour operator, what would you do there? You'd have to change your refund policies on different.
Yeah, this is why we want more information about what this COVID-19 charter will be about and what the CAA is going to do about it, because, you know, it's very difficult for tour operators just to carry all the risk under PTRs, but, you know, we operate under package travel regulations, so that's what we're going to operate under, and therefore, you know, I will be looking to sort of talk to the CAA and understand, you know, what will these powers be. Because ultimately, you know, airlines and all suppliers should toe the line. And if someone's on a package holiday, they should respect the change, free change, amend, whatever, the flexibility, especially in these times, so that the tour operator, no one's out of pocket. We can just literally run that through the process in the way that it used to work when FCDO advice came in against a destination. You know, airlines always played ball. And I think here they're going to, you know, we need the suppliers on side. And so, you know, we will be working really hard, and we'll remove partners that do not play ball with us and do not want to amend or cancel as a tour operator. But then, of course, it limits your what you have to offer. But we can't take any risks. It's just too costly.
So you'll have to. Sorry, John. I was going to say you'll have to go back to. You're going to have to look at your partners. You know, and say you need ultimate flexibility from them, so you don't end up with the risk on you.
Yeah, we've been doing that anyway, but we're going to reinforce it. But I think we need more support from the CAA and the government with this, because it's you know, the whole situation all last year has just blown a hole through the PTRs and just made it unmanageable. And it does need a proper review, because they are valuable, you know, and people do trust packages. But at the same time, it can't be the person that with probably almost the smallest margin that's carrying the can. So, you know, let's see what comes out of this charter.
Let's see, we're still waiting, aren't we? Okay, just back to you, Alistair, on a similar point, but you mentioned that a lot of your bookings were for October onwards. We've had quite a few people saying, though, if they don't get a good summer, that could be the end of them. You know, people need to make money through the summer. They've struggled along this far. You know, I know lots of people have got some advanced bookings into 22, 23. I mean, the cruise lines they're bringing out their programs really early. They're selling all these advanced bookings. But if there are plenty of people that need the summer to start sort of to get things moving, are you worried that we're going to see on the back of this some more failures?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, it's remarkable really that there's been just less than 30 failures in a year in an industry with a very long food chain in terms of all the suppliers within the tourism industry. And if there's no summer, the weaker agencies and tour operators won't have any cash. They'll already be heavily leveraged. They'll have all the government borrowings. They've got to start paying that back. They won't be able to bond through insurance, so any cash they've got will be supporting a bond, which again is supporting the CAA and the PTRs. So I think that it will have an immense effect if there's no summer for agents and smaller tour operators. There's got to be.
And when you say no summer, what would it, like, given that they're saying that we're hopeful for something, but what do we need? There's obviously going to be something happening, but I mean, it needs to be fairly substantial, doesn't it?
It does. I think all the kind of agents and operators I talk to are looking to get August, September and October out of the summer 21 season. I think many have taken off sale anything. We don't sell anything before July the 1st, for example, and that's a choice, and it's just a choice that you've got consumers who amended 3 times now, started with Thomas Cook. So you've got to take a point when you think that things are practical to operate, and so I think people will be looking at their cash flow to get the second half of the summer season, and they're looking at the cash position for those 3 months being active months.
Okay, I mean, you're nodding, Gemma, and I know one of the things you said was that you were really hopeful that we'd see more on, and you've mentioned it already, the sector-specific support, which is still not forthcoming despite the the unique aspects of our industry through this pandemic. I mean, to Alistair's point that some people just won't have the cash to get through unless things start moving. Does that worry you and some of your colleagues within ATO, etc.?
Yeah, on behalf of obviously all of the ATO agents, it's a really tricky position. We are, absolutely stretched to capacity, whether it's the case that, like myself, you're still working on your own a year later with staff on furlough, you still have overheads, you still have costs, tax and NI, all these kind of things that need to be paid for, yet nothing's coming in. I know many people who, refinance their homes and all kinds of stuff to support their businesses, not ever imagining that we would still be in it this long. And I just think the sheer disregard for an industry that creates so much money for our economy is just, it's basically negligent, isn't it? We are treated with such disregard, yet, Shaps came out this morning all smiley about his report, and, this was great. It was, as my grandfather used to say, it's like giving a donkey one oat. We really haven't heard anything that's particularly useful, going to get us particularly very far, and really gives us any kind of hope for anything before, as Alistair said, maybe July. And the other thing that I think is really frustrating is their understanding of the nuances of travel and how it works. It's not possible to come out on the 1st of May, if that's the date, or whenever it is, and say, great, these are our green countries, go from the 17th of May. It's not possible to do that. You cannot turn around the airlines that quickly, the tour operators, it's just not possible. And the amount of talking that we've done to government from the various trade bodies, the lobbying, individuals, every agent in the country sending a letter to their MP probably, and they still either, I don't know whether they choose to not understand or they really just don't want to engage because it's a bigger issue than they really understand. But it just won't work that easily. And I think for consumers that are thinking that there will be some countries from the 17th of May, everything crossed, maybe it's only going to be a handful. The understanding then that there are so few flights available to get them there, the prices are going to be horrifically expensive, and we, might have this PCR testing still in place. What does all of that mean? It's not helpful. It just baffles me how they can still leave us out to dry with nothing to come back to. The hospitality industry have had buckets of support. They had their Eat Out to help out last year. They've had these excessive grants to get started again. But these aren't even possible for our high street agents who can open their shops from Monday but have nothing to sell. It might as well be an empty supermarket. There's nothing for them to sell to make any money on the day that they open. And that's a disgusting position to be put in by our government.
Yeah, the restart grants, I mean, the discrepancy there, like up to 18,000 if you're a hospitality, but I think the average was about 2.5 per branch. Is that right? Yeah. Just on the PCR test that you just mentioned there, John, what do you make of Shaps's commitment to bringing the price down? I mean, Steve Heapy this morning was very skeptical of this word, well, we're committed to bringing the price down. He said, I want action, not just commitment. You can be committed to all sorts of things, but do you think that is something they will seriously look at and get done in time for this summer?
Well, I mean, I was surprised that he acknowledged that it was cheaper abroad. I suppose he reads Which as well, but I've not seen them commit to very much so far. So I would be, I'm cautious about it. Especially when his first response to that was that he will work with the travel industry and the companies doing it. Well, what have we got to do with testing? Yes, okay, if he works with us, we'll say we'll just put the lateral flow in. That's free. You're dishing them out. So yeah, I mean, that doesn't fill me with confidence at all, and it just feels like we're going to have to go out and do it ourselves once again and try and see what we can get to a reasonable price. But we're not experts. How do we know what price to get to negotiate these tests down to on behalf of customers?
Are you getting approached all the time as a tour operator by these testing companies offering you?
No, we're not. Well, we were at the beginning. We're not so much now. I mean, these guys have profited through this massively. When they started, they were charging £200 a test.
Not much cheaper now. Some of them are still £150, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous. I mean, these things should be down at well below £50. I mean, ideally more like 20, 25 quid. And then at least a family of four coming back, they could probably afford 100 quid. But otherwise, for 2 adults, 2 kids come back and they've got to spend hundreds of pounds. It's just ridiculous. It'll put them off going. And I think the whole situation of not knowing when these destinations will be announced. I'm with Gemma. How can we organise? How can we look at the suppliers? We don't even know if the hotels and the destinations will be open in some of the countries. Will they have a pragmatic approach? Will they look at the Canaries in Spain separately for once? Now that apparently in Spain they've stopped the traffic between regions, and therefore they're trying to control COVID within the regions in Spain. So if the Canaries got to a decent level, could they open it? I mean, that would be a lifesaver for the British travel industry. Will they learn from last year? Who knows? There's very little in there to give us any kind of confidence or be able to plan, and we're only weeks away.
It's a shame, because I think we were waiting for this this report, and then everything was going to spring into action. Everyone would know what to do and start their planning, but we're still sitting here. Can't really do anything.
And my advice to everyone at the moment is, for the next 3 weeks, we're all going to have to go dark. You've got to literally not spend a penny, because you're not going to make anything. You've got no one departing, so we're all in the same boat on that. So if no one's traveling, you're not making any money. And if today carries on as it is, it's going to be very soft until those destinations are announced.
Yeah. Alistair, just on so if they don't get the cost of this PCR test down, I mean, I think ABTA had suggested that if you've had your lateral flow before departing, only if you then get a positive test. And I know John was saying we then rely on trust and people coming forward, but is that feasible? Do you think the government would go for that? That the suggestion that you only take the PCR if you've had this positive test before departing, is that doable, workable?
It's certainly a sensible suggestion, isn't it? That if you've done your pre-departure test, lateral flow, that's negative, you could do the same when you returned, and that's practical. That makes sense. I think PCR's got a whole host of problems. If you remember back to when government released the list at the back end of last summer, a number of suppliers on that list couldn't supply. Actually, they were on the list, but actually they fell at the first hurdle, and there's a reason here why these prices have stayed onerous, and that's because that they're profiteering from the position, because government won't sit in, and I think Grant Chap said this morning that, well, if they do that, we'll take them off the list. Well, that's just not enough, is it? That's just not going to help. I think if there's evidence that PCR tests are less than half the cost in the EU, then government have got to take notice of that without doubt. But practical steps here. I think what ABTA have tried to do is take a cautious path, and it does make sense that on a green destination, lateral flow test is negative, lateral flow test on return. just make sense. And
but if it makes sense, why does the government not see that? And then what do we just got to go and lobby again for this sensible approach that, you know, why have they've been listening to us for weeks apparently, but they've come out with a policy that we don't really agree with.
I think all the way through this, there was always a very strong view that the health lobby will always be stronger than the tourism lobby, not helped by not having, you know, a single minister in charge of it. But you know, you can see that you know, Boris Johnson isn't going to say on Monday or Tuesday, as he said, I think it makes lots of sense to take affordable testing. And we all thought, yeah, it makes lots of sense. Actually, government are going to move on lateral flow tests. For that to change on Friday, you know, something has changed there. And, you know, on one hand, they want to stick to the 17th of May date, even though nobody's going to fly anywhere. I wouldn't have thought on the 17th of May. And that could be a trade-off in government to, you know, to create the position. And it's just disappointing. But if there's anything that government could move on to show compromise, it's PCR testing, because that in green destinations makes no sense.
Okay, so presumably you'll be, I guess, keeping the pressure on, will you, Alistair?
Yeah, completely, of course. And you know, practical steps. We all want to be safe. We all want international travel to resume. We all need to make the food chain work. The last thing we want is, you know, one step in the chain, you know, private providers of testing profiteering from the position to stop international travel resuming. And John's correct, you know, today we should be dealing with a significant uptick, like we all were on the 23rd of February, and none of us are doing that. And that just shows the, you know, the nature of the statements this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I mean, Gemma, you said there were a couple of positives. You mentioned the cruise news, you know, that they're going to allow international cruising to resume alongside the wider travel restart. I mean, that is good news, but clearly we still need the Foreign Office advice to be lifted against cruise. You know, it's not hand in hand. And I think that's another worry that people, you know, and it could be the same for other destinations. We had that last year, didn't we, around Spain and the Balearics. So that's still a hurdle to overcome, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the cruise industry have done an amazing job. I mean, if anybody's ever listening to any of the webinars that they've hosted about the work that has been done by the individual and the collective cruise lines in securing their passengers' safety going forward, they have come so far. And, you know, there are going to be very few places that are safer than being on some of these cruise lines. And so rightly so, they should be restarted at the same time. But again, where you've got a cruise line going to multiple destinations, obviously, therefore comes the Foreign Office advice from those and how quickly that can change. And, you know, imagine trying to change a cruise itinerary when we have this watch list around. It's just going to be a logistical nightmare. So, you know, again, we watch and wait and see. But yeah, it is positive to know that they're classing the whole industry together. But I think one thing, you know, we've just been talking about PCR testing is, you know, how honest are people going to be with their testing when they come back? We always saw that we saw last year it was massively flawed with the, you know, the passenger locator forms. And, you know, what about people that take a PCR test before coming home and test positive? Are they going to declare that and go into quarantine measures in that particular country that they have to pay for? You know, it really hasn't been very well thought through in terms of the practicalities of it. And that's where it is a massive shame that the government haven't engaged with our industry, because we have all these answers and we have all the ways forward from our many, many years of experience on how to do this and do it properly. And still 14 months later, they're not interested in engaging. And that's really sad.
Do you feel let down, John? Do you feel the government has let, you know, particularly on this report, which we all had sort of, you know, quite strong hopes for?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, obviously they're working within very difficult parameters. You know, I mean, health and safety is paramount. But I did think that having consulted for quite a while with a wide number of companies, and I know that dnata airport ops was part of that, and many parts of the industry. So it seems like they did go across the whole range. of industry kind of businesses and types of companies. It's a shame that it's come out with really quite a narrow view on it, and options that are really basically saying we'll make it difficult, so only the really determined will go on holiday this summer, and possibly to a handful of destinations, and wait until we tell you which ones they are. And it's difficult for all our businesses to plan, because you'd almost like to know the worst, really, because then you could try and plan for it. At the moment, we all live in hope, and I think, as Gemma says, sort of 14 months on, we are a little bit battered, and it is hard to lift the teams and say, yeah, travel will still come out of this, because at every hurdle, it doesn't seem to really go forward that much, and I'm just disappointed with the PCR tests. I think that's an odd barrier to put in, and I'm glad that APTO, I know they'll do their job of pushing hard on that, like they've done throughout the pandemic on other areas. But it feels that we've half listened to you, but then we've gone and made it quite difficult. And there's just too many businesses that rely on that will need, going back to the earlier question, that will need a decent summer, because a lot of people are carrying vast amounts of credit notes, lots of their staff on furlough, no cash coming in. The reopening is actually going to be more scary than the closing down, or the sort of battening down, because cash flow is going to be a massive issue. When you're pushing through loads of credit notes, you still got to pay for the suppliers when the client travels. And there's a lot of companies that are going to be in a difficult situation unless they've got fresh bookings coming in.
And let's let you have the final word then, Alistair. I mean, John was saying his advice is just to maybe go dark for a few weeks till we get this list. Is that what would be your advice to people watching this?
Yeah, I think the travel industry is resilient. We all know that, but lots of the industry have run out of cash now. They're living on kind of government borrowing. They're managing their way using maximising furlough and business rates, this kind of thing. And John's completely right that the reopening is going to be difficult, because to reopen you need your people, but you also need productivity and some cash to be able to start paying the bills. So without any kind of support, it's going to be a very cautious reopening. And it's great to see a number of chains who've made their own statements about reopening, particularly retail chains, because that will at least help, but it will be costly help. So, certainly manage cash, up through the early months of the summer, to make sure that we, payroll can be met, and where immediate bookings. So this is going to be a super late, isn't it? This is going to be
late, yeah.
Book today, go next week. So at least consumers are going to have to pay the full value. But there's going to be some of that, but it's actually going to be technically harder than the close down for many people. So yeah, I'm with John. I think lots of caution, lots of cash flow analytics, all that sort of stuff, to be able to get through to the other side. And I think the other side will probably be late July, August.
Okay. All right, everyone. We're all nodding, so that's a good place to leave it. I'm so grateful for your time. I'm sorry it's not more upbeat. Hopefully we can get you all on in a few weeks' time when they announce there are some destinations on the green list that hopefully you sell holidays to. But for now, thank you so much to Alistair from Bluebay Travel, to Gemma from Haslemere Travel, to John from dnata. Thank you all.